Okay, so let's talk about the developing on AWS certification for just a minute. Okay. So the developing on AWS certification is one of a number of certifications that you may or may not be aware of. There's 11 certifications inside the AWS ecosystem. These are all multiple choice, multiple right answer exams, except for SysOps Administrator Associates. That one has hands-on labs inside of it. That would be this one right here. But the one that we're focused on is this one. So let's focus on that one because it's a 65 question, what I like to jokingly refer to as a trivia exam, except when you go from the cloud practitioner up to associates level, up to the pro and specialty level, the trivia turns into a scenario. So it gets really hard, really fast, especially at the pro and the specialty level. Those questions are orders of magnitude more difficult than associates. So when you're working at that level, it's still tough, but it's not like really hard. So let's talk about developer first. All right, so developer. So the first thing you do whenever you're taking a certification of any type is let's find out what the certification is going to test, right? Let's get the details. So first of all, this is 65 questions and it's either multiple choice or multiple response. You can take it at a testing center. You can take it proctored online. Just know that if you take it proctored online, you got to set up your environment for that. And you're not going to use your booze equipment. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Zscaler has caused people to fail. So don't use your booze equipment if you can get away with it for your exam. You're going to get about 130 minutes to complete the exam. And excuse me. 130 minutes, 65 questions. So you're going to get a little bit more than 2 minutes to run through each question. At the pro and specialty level, by the way, you end up with almost 3 minutes per question, but that's it. And it takes you like 90 seconds to read the question in many cases. So what's going to happen is that you're going to get about 2 minutes to work each question. And what's weird about this is that every one of these certifications comes with an exam guide. And if we go look at the exam guide, which I actually might already have, but I might have deleted it. Let's just download it again. Oh, yeah, I've downloaded it like 3 times recently. Perfect. So this exam guide, right? DVAC01, Developer Associate 001. Notice that ideally you'll have one or more hands-on experience developing on AWS. You can get around that if you do a bunch of projects, just so you know, but you do need to do projects to make sure you got some hands-on. They do require you to know a language. You need to know application lifecycle, SDLC, right? How that functions, write code for serverless application, and how to use containers. So they do expect you to know a little bit about general industry concepts around serverless and general industry concepts around containers. Now, what they want you to know is they want you to know how to use like software development kits and all that. They want you to understand the shared responsibility model. These like pieces here are things that they want you to know how to do. You should have this knowledge, and that's what you're getting here, right? So this is the knowledge that you should have to take the exam. Now, they're not going to ask you about design. They're not going to ask you about how to administer things like users and whatnot, or containers, or even fleets of EC2 systems. There's a bunch of stuff they don't ask you that's kind of missing here. They're not going to ask you anything that's for the most part covered in the systems administration exam and in the architecting exam. Design. They're not going to really ask you those questions. Understanding compliance and licensing, they're definitely not going to ask you any security stuff that's not related to application security. Now, multiple choice and multiple response. So that just means like A, B, C, D, or E, or 2 answers, right? And then they're going to want you to select one or more responses. Now, here's the catch that most people aren't aware of. Most of these exams are 65 questions. One of them is 75. That's the DevOps engineering one, just because it covers a large range of material. There's no penalty for guessing. You don't get partial credit, right? What's interesting is that only 50 out of these 65 questions are going to affect your score. Now, which 50? I have no idea. To give you an example, I went and took the machine learning specialty exam on Saturday, which, I've done a lot of data science-y work, but I've never worked no one's ever paid me to be a machine learning specialist. unlike DevOps, which I have done all over the place. What's interesting is I'm in there taking the exam, and like the first 8 questions are like, do you know AWS forecasts? It's like, that wasn't in the study guide, right? Do you know ARIMA? Like there's all these questions about things that were nowhere in the study guide, which may have just been industry assumed knowledge, because, you know, like I said, I've never been paid to be a data scientist. But I'm familiar with forecasts, but it wasn't anywhere on the study sheets, right? And so I could kind of pick out like which questions were probably the gimmies, because it seemed like they were testing the waters, like, do you know new services? The reason I say that, by the way, is that the exams are 6 months behind any service announcement. So if something came out 6 months ago, that's when it's typically going to show up in the exam. But be aware that you're like, how do I figure out the scoring for this? Only 50 of the 65 questions actually count towards your actual score. And you're like, well, what's the score, Michael? Well, for developer associates, you need a 720 out of 1,000 at a minimum. So it's a scaled scoring, right? So what that means is that at a minimum, you need 720. Sometimes you need actually higher to pass. I don't know that I've ever even heard of it going above like 750, 760. They just have variation because the exam form changes. And so, you know, some exams are more difficult than others. And anyway, so you actually can get a score report after you take your thing that will tell you exactly how well you did on the exams. I am in general not a great test taker. So typically I score anywhere from 800 to 900 kind of on average in the exams. So, you know, very rarely will I get like a 960 or something. So, and for this particular one, you need a 720 actually to pass the exam. So that means that out of 50 questions at 2 points apiece, you need to get 36 questions right at a minimum. No, Jacob, like I was saying before, you don't get partial credit. You have to get the question right. So otherwise, like you don't get partial credit for it. Yeah. Now, here's the other thing, and probably the most important reason for you to actually grab the exam guide for the Developer Associates exam is that this is going to tell you where you need to focus most of your time. For example, obviously development with AWS services is going to be the majority, along with application security. Did that catch you off guard? I said, I just because there's not licensing and compliance questions, security questions, doesn't mean there's not AppSec questions, which there are. After that comes deployment. So that's about a little over 20%. And then the remaining 10 and 12% are refactoring, monitoring, troubleshooting. That's the remainder. Now, if you take our practice exams that we're giving to you today for free, right, then it's automatically going to have this distribution inside the practice exam that you take. But just so you know, you need to spend more time studying the security, app security, and studying the developing with the AWS services than you do any other thing. Deployment runs a close second. So you've got AppSec, then you've got developing on AWS, then you've got, developing on AWS, AppSec, and then you've got deployment, and then you've got the whole thing around refactoring, monitoring, troubleshooting. Those are like the lowest sections. Now you might say, well, what does that mean, Michael? Well, guess what? Here it is. So deployment to them basically means, hey, do you know how to use these services at a very high level? Do you know what they're used for, right? Do you know how to use Beanstalk? Which I got to tell you, I have a love-hate relationship with Beanstalk because it's a great place to start. It's not a great place to stay as far as like developing your AWS designs and applications, but it is a great service. So it's good to know, right? Then how to prepare application deployment packages, and then how to deploy serverless applications, which includes, by the way, traffic redirection, using an API gateway, metering, scaling. How do you do aliases, debugging? Like you need to know serverless to a certain degree. And then next is security. For example, how do you do encryption at rest and encryption in transit? How do you like initiate communications like SIG4 and all that with via the SDKs? And then, this is more about application authentication. So you do actually have to know a little bit about Cognito, including its mobile push, its sync, its identity pools. What's the other thing it's called? Identity or user pools. Sorry, identity or user pools. I forgot. So you do need to know about Cognito a little bit, because Cognito is the application user like store, identity store service that Amazon has. So we got a little bit of security when it comes to authorization and authentication for applications. You got a little bit, about how to use IAM and also how to encrypt data at rest and in transit. And then we start, obviously domain 3 is development. And domain 3 obviously is the biggest one that they want you to know about. And that includes Lambda and different actions around DynamoDB. And you can see all the sources and Kinesis. If it sounds like a lot, by the way, the main reason I'm running you through this is that if you see something here that you know nothing about, the way you use this guide is you go through and you write that. You're like, I haven't touched Cognito at all. I don't even know what that is. Write that down. That's something you want to pay attention to. Never touched API Gateway? Pay attention to that. Because I just want to say that between the course and the program guide that we give you, you're going to have plenty of material. Like you're going to have what you need to study laid out for you very clearly. Throw in the practice exams plus the labs, you're golden. So don't worry. The main reason I'm having you look at this is I want you to identify services that you absolutely have never seen before and you know nothing about. Usually you want to put those in your little study notebook, whether it's digital or otherwise, because you want to pay attention to those services. And then functional requirements into application design. So real-time versus batch, synchronous versus asynchronous, event-driven versus scheduled polling, different consistency models. Again, this all gets covered as part of the steps that we provide to you. And then how to use messaging services, DynamoDB, Elasticache, Lambda functions, obviously how to externalize state, like taking sessions off of the system, which is what we talked about. And then this is interesting because I don't think they really ask any questions about this, to be frank about it. Retries with exponential backoff. I don't know that I've seen that, but fair enough. Still covered in the material. And then refactoring is like how to optimize to best use services and features. Like they might have you say, hey, instead of you need a high performance disk, and so someone's been storing everything on S3, and you need to switch it over to EBS, right? As an example. Or someone is realizing that their relational database is not able to scale to 1 trillion users a day or whatever, and you might switch over that portion of the code to DynamoDB. Is exam programming language agnostic? Yes, Billy, it is. It is programming language agnostic. They're not going to test you on any knowledge on any specific language. They're not going to pull out Python and expect you to know it. They usually use pseudocode to explain stuff. Obviously, decoupling, isolating dependencies, creating stateless, horizontal scalability, that's all still part of the whole refactoring process. Again, if that seems obscure to you, don't worry. There's steps that we have for you to cover that. And then last is really just about X-Ray and CloudWatch, how to use those, in addition to using a bunch of the integrated code services, how to use VPC flow logs, stuff like that. So again, most of that's covered. This is a really confusing appendix that they've added now to all of the exam guides. It basically lists everything they could ask you about, which I gotta tell you, when you look at this, you're a little bit like, hold on. How many services is that in this? Really, they're gonna ask you about fault injection simulator? That just came out, actually, like 2 months ago. Anyway, that's probably gonna be one of those questions. But the rest of this, like S3, KMS, IAM, Cognito. And by the way, a lot of you are probably looking at this going, oh my God, that's a lot. Like, how much of this do we need to know? Just as it relates to developing applications, you do not need to be a KMS expert. You don't need to be an API gateway expert. You don't, like, this is not a professional or specialty level exam. This is an associate's level exam. So it's deeper than cloud practitioner, but it's not so deep that you've got to be like a pro on it. You don't have to do that. So don't panic. After about like 8 weeks of study, honestly, after this class at 5 hours a week, you can actually pass the exam. We've done this. I can't even tell you, hundreds, if not a couple thousand times, hundreds easily with students. And a lot of people are in this space and they're like, there's no way I can pass that exam. You can easily. If you do the work, it can be done. Okay. So don't freak out about it. Let's see. I'm going to post this guide up. Now, these are things, by the way, they're definitely out of scope. Like they're not going to ask you about game lift or Lex or, poly or all this other stuff. There's a huge list of stuff they're not going to ask you about. So if you really want to know, you can go take a look at it. So let me put the link to the exam guide into chat. Okay. Other things to show you is that, let's say you want to go sign up for the exam, just quickly. First of all, you're actually going to sign in using an Amazon account, not an AWS account. I highly recommend that you use your personal account. You're going to sign in on the left. You're not going to sign in unless you know you're part of the APN team, which no one I've ever talked to in these classes is part of the APN team. So you're all signing in on the left-hand side. When you sign in, it's going to ask you for your Amazon, not your AWS login. This is probably going to be something you already have because we want it associated with you, not necessarily with booze. Okay. And so once you sign in, it's going to basically say, okay, let's go to your account, and you're going to get redirected to a website hosted by certmetrics.com/Amazon. Notice you can come here, for example, and see things like if you want to see all of your achieved certifications, right? If you want to see your exam history. What else is here? Oh, different benefits, like you get discounts on exams. And I wish they had better swag. They have horrible swag. Amazon could do so much better than they do, but regardless. The other thing is you get digital badges. So, by the way, that's just representative. Or is it? Let's go take a look. This is Credly, by the way, allows people to verify that you actually have the exam. Machine learning, DevOps. Okay, there's all of them, plus some instructor stuff. Really? I haven't delivered more than 10 classes in the last 5 years. That's not true. That's weird. Anyway, regardless, it's just digital badging. Who cares? Profiles here as well. And then, but the other thing that's here is if you go back to home, this is how you register for an exam. Now, when you register for exam, and by the way, the reason I'm showing you this is that I believe you're all going to get exam voucher codes. Has anybody gotten that email yet about an exam voucher code? No, I believe. Yeah, you may not have gotten it yet. They're still processing it. This whole thing really wasn't finalized until like about a week ago. I believe you're going to get exam voucher codes. If you don't get it for this one, you definitely get it for the next class that you take. But what will happen is that you're going to get an exam voucher. It's going to have like a licensing code in it. I'm going to show you where to stick that code because it's not intuitive. All right, so let's say we come in here and let's say I got to recertify in developer as well. So let's say I'm going to take developer. So I'm going to go ahead and schedule it. Now, I typically schedule with Pearson VUE. You can schedule with PSI. If we weren't in the middle of Omicron, I would tell you to go to the testing center because it's super safe and all the other stuff. But I want people to be comfortable, and you do what's best, what you're most comfortable with. Just because dealing with the testing center is way easier than doing a proctored exam at your house. So I'm going to click on Pearson VUE, which is going to log me into the Pearson VUE website. Now, it's then going to say, hey, do you want to run this at a testing center or do you want to do it online? And I'm just going to say online. Now, I want you to know that it then popped up all these things that you should read. You should definitely take the time to read them at some point in time. Because, for example, you can't take it. I don't know if you can see this, but over my left-hand side, there's a little table with a laptop on it. That's where I took my exam on Saturday because I have double monitors and all this equipment on top of my desk. You can't take an exam at that kind of place. You have to be able to take pictures of all 4 sides of the desk that you're taking it on. So I just usually take it onto a laptop with a little table right there. So just know that you need to read all this, including having a single 2 forms of photo ID if you go into a testing center, 1 if you're here. You got to check in 30 minutes early. So just know, and you're not going to use your booze equipment for this, right? So they also, by the way, are going to take an acoustic fingerprint of your room. No one can walk into the house. You can't have pets with any kind of like collars on them jingling around. It's really tough for them to control the environment. And so they have to really kind of lock it down to a certain degree. It's not impossible, but just know that it's not as comfortable as walking into a testing center.
Don't they also put uh, things that spy on you on your computer when you do the proctored online exam that you really don't want to install on your computer?
Well, they don't install it. It's just an executable, Andrew, that runs for the life cycle of the test. Actually, it's not a permanent executable. I know because I isolated the environment and trapped any like syscall changes against the kernel. So
Okay.
they don't install anything. What they do is they run an executable. It takes over your machine, and then when you're done with the exam, it just shuts down. It doesn't run anymore. Makes no registry changes. Lays no copies, no files out to the file system, other than the temp directory. So
Okay.
yeah. The reason you're not using your booz equipment for that is that it will work on the booz equipment, but Zscaler will sometimes block it randomly. So if you get kicked out of the exam for more than 20 minutes, they're going to cancel it and you won't get your money back. So
I had to do one for MuleSoft online, and it was a nightmare getting a computer to work with the software. I would never recommend it to anyone.
yeah, this one's just tough because of the precursors. Once you get into the exam, it's actually okay. But I agree, it's not the most comfortable experience. Having to, I usually pull like a dining room table or some other table aside, isolate a laptop, and then just take it on a tiny little laptop. By the way, just so you know, you can't take a break or step away from it if you are taking it online proctored. If you're at a testing center, if you want to pause and go to the bathroom, they actually will allow you to do that. At least they used to. I just clicked yes to a bunch of confirmations, and then I'm going to give away my firstborn, all my genetic material, and my next winning lottery ticket here. So I'm just kidding. Obviously, I just said yes to like facial recognition, a bunch of other things. They do compare your face against the license, so they do a little facial comparison. And then there's little things here like you have 48 hours, 24 hours to basically cancel, change the exam. You can only reschedule twice. The third time they're going to ask you to cancel it. If you were more than 15 minutes late for your exam, you're not going to be able to do it. Now, if you're in queue waiting for them to release you and it takes 30 minutes, you're not late. They're talking about like you signing in to the system. If you're more than 15 minutes late, then you're canceled. I'm sure you're like left with this like, wow, Michael, this sounds really horrible. This doesn't sound like a great experience, especially with Andrew and I both are like, yeah, it's not such a great thing. It's actually not that bad. You just need to be prepared for it. You're going to choose your language. I find it fascinating that they only have English and Japanese as the two options for spoken language, but they have tons of written language options. So let's say we're going to take it on Saturday. One thing I would recommend is that, let's say you've chosen the developing on AWS exam, you're choosing on Saturday. I would go with 24-hour time just to make sure you don't get confused about AM and PM. Please pick a time where you are fresh without coffee. Okay. So I'm usually pretty good at like 10 o'clock. So let's say 10 a.m. That's going to do another confirmation because they actually confirmed about 2 screens back. Then you proceed to checkout. And this, by the way, when you get to the very next to last step, this is where you stick your exam voucher in. Okay. So once you stick it in here and you click apply, all the billing information typically will go away. You hit next, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to pay for it. And you hit next, it's going to ask you to confirm. You submit it. You're going to get an email that says, hey, by the way, you're signed up for an exam. The very next thing you do is stick this in your calendar or whatever you use to remind yourself. So make sure that you remember that you've got an exam and go ahead and add 30 minutes to it. So if we set it at 10, you're going to set your calendar entry for 9:30. If this is your first time taking an online proctored exam, you're going to show up 30 minutes early. If it's your second or third time and you're feeling comfortable, you can show like 15 or 20 minutes early. I showed up 10 minutes early last time. And I was like pretty much right on time, right? But I also have a space. I know the drill. I had my phone ready to go to take pictures and do all the stuff. My license was already ready and out. Nothing was in arm's reach. I'd already taken all my watches and stuff off because you can't have any electronics. You also can't, by the way, cover your mouth or talk to yourself while you're taking the online proctored exams. So just be mindful of that. And so you get an email. You're going to get an email about 4 days before. You're going to email the day before. You're going to get an email the day of. So you will get plenty of emails to remind you. Okay. Any questions about where to stick your voucher/promo code when you get it? Reminder that the developer exam is an associate's level exam. Reminder that we're going to provide you with a program study guide, which I'm going to talk about this afternoon. And we're also going to provide you with lab access, and we're going to provide you with practice exams. So this afternoon, I'm going to run through the certification study guide. By then, hopefully you will have access to your practice exams. And then from there, we're going to spend some time actually running through some practice exam questions. Okay. I'm going to make sure that you have access to all that. Okay. With that, I'm going to shift gears and shift back to the course content unless anyone has any burning questions that they really want answered right now.